I'm Jean Chilcott, the Planning Program Manager working out of the Rancho Cordova office. The planning program evaluates changes occurring in our region to ensure that our basin plans are effectively protecting beneficial uses through our regulation and policies. Our projects typically take quite a while, 3 to 10 years, because any changes to our basin plans are reflected in all of our regulatory programs. So when we make a change, we want to be sure that it's reasonable and feasible.
We consider the physical diversity of the region, ranging from the Sierra Nevada to the Delta and the Tulare Lake bed, and the variety of and often competing beneficial uses. We take the time to ensure that the science is valid and that we've coordinated with stakeholders to really understand their concerns before we make any recommendations. The planning program accounts for a little under 10% of the resources in the region, or roughly 23 staff. The resources are divided into 4 subprograms: General Basin Planning, TMDLs, the Delta, and CV salts. Though most planning efforts are long-term, during fiscal year 15-16 we did complete and continue to implement some projects. Notably, we completed edits and updates to both basin plans of previously adopted amendments. We updated the groundwater protection strategy. We continued to implement the salinity control program in the lower San Joaquin River, including phasing in a real-time salinity management component. And we continued coordination with Department of Pesticide Regulation and US EPA Office of Pesticides on pesticide use regulations. However, most of fiscal year 15-16 was spent on developing the foundation to complete major long-term projects during this fiscal year. I'd like to highlight a few of these major projects now, including the Integrated Report, Pyrethroid Control Program, Statewide Mercury Control Program for Reservoirs, and elements of the 2014 Delta Strategic Plan. First, the Integrated Report. The report is required under the Clean Water Act and is an evaluation of the overall conditions of surface water within our region, as well as a list of water bodies with impaired beneficial uses due to discrete constituents. Staff began the evaluation of more than 8,000 miles of rivers and streams and over 640 water body segments for over 200 different constituents. Once the evaluation began, we diverted the equivalent of 5 staff, as well as an additional administrative and temporary staff, to support this effort in order to meet tight timelines and ensure careful consideration of each data point, as well as a robust analysis. The extra effort was critical for this project, since either a TMDL or some other regulatory control effort must be developed for every identified impaired water body to ensure that beneficial uses and water quality objectives are met in the future. We've also begun developing a pyrethroid control program. Pyrethroids are effective pesticides used in both urban and agricultural environments. Findings through the integrated report have also shown toxicity in surface water bodies. Any control program needs to balance impact to users, dischargers, and the environment. There are significant challenges in developing this program, including the very low levels documented to cause toxicity and the significant reductions that will be required of all dischargers. The limited information on treatment alternatives, effectiveness or cost, and possible unintended consequences, including mandatory minimum penalties on dischargers that have little or no control of the source of the pyrethroids. 3 public workshops were held in 2016 to have an open discussion and debate on the protective concentration goals, analytical limitations, and implementation options. Findings from these workshops help formulate the control program that will be considered this year. Staff at Region 5 and Region 2 have also been spearheading development of a statewide control program for mercury-impaired reservoirs. The control program would address elevated fish mercury levels in approximately 150 reservoirs and implement objectives to protect humans, wildlife, and endangered species. During fiscal year 15-16, several outreach meetings were held with reservoir owners and operators and other stakeholders to discuss practical approaches for a phased program that includes pilot tests on fisheries management to reduce the mercury levels in the fish. The Delta is a world in itself, and we have several active projects moving forward. One is implementing the Delta Mercury Control Program and Exposure Reduction Program. Entities such as wetland managers and stormwater and wastewater agencies are conducting numerous studies to reduce methylmercury discharges to the Delta, and staff has been reviewing midterm progress reports to ensure that we have sufficient information to reevaluate this TMDL in the future. We have funding in place for exposure reduction activities, and several community groups have received training and small grants to help them provide information to their community members about mercury and Delta fish. Quarterly exposure reduction meetings have been held to support education and networking among the stakeholders, and trained grant recipients have utilized educational material translated into 8 languages to reach out to community organizations in 5 counties. Signs in multiple languages have also been completed and will be posted at popular fishing locations around the Delta. The Delta Nutrient Research Plan is a project that's developing the foundation to determine effects from nutrients on the overall pelagic organism decline and to help us potentially adjust future nutrient regulation. White papers on the available knowledge and data gaps on nutrients' effects on harmful algal blooms and invasive species, as well as modeling needs, have been completed. Stakeholders have been actively engaged throughout the process and are helping with the final white paper on speciation effects, prioritizing future nutrient research activities. The Delta Regional Monitoring Program picked up steam during fiscal year 15-16. Permits were amended to enable participation, a charter and a governance structure were approved, and assessment questions and development of monitoring designs were completed for 4 priority areas: pathogens, current use pesticides with toxicity, mercury, and nutrients, with pathogen and pesticide monitoring beginning in 2015. The sampling design for the pesticide monitoring included monthly monitoring at 5 key locations with focus on monitoring during significant hydraulic events, such as winter storm events and the irrigation season. Preliminary results have been provided by the Pesticide Fate Research Group of the U.S. Geological Survey and indicate that all the samples collected contain a mixture of pesticide compounds. Higher varieties were detected in the southern delta and in urban areas during storm events. The results are preliminary, and more work is being done on evaluating specific constituents and concentrations. And then we have salt. Rather than listen to me explain the salt issue, let's listen to an excerpt from the Salt of the Earth video developed by the Water Education Foundation and co-funded by the State Water Board.
Salinity is a big deal. It's much like a cancer.
Salinity is like arthritis. It gradually debilitates your life.
Societies historically have been killed by the White Death, by salt.
There will be tens of thousands of acres of land that will no longer be capable of producing crops and will be beyond reclamation.
All consumers in the United States and maybe even beyond could feel the effects of it.
We're going to have basically people versus agriculture versus habitat.
It's a ticking time bomb. So it's a problem that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed now.
We talk about carbon footprint these days, but we also have a salt footprint.
We're going to have to be smarter.
Do you really need to use a water softener?
Do you use liquid detergents? Do you use powder types?
We're in an age of personal responsibility.
I've said on and on, get out of the gloom and doom world, and we can deal with this.
We all cause the problem. We all contribute to the problem. We can all solve the problem.
From the air, California's vast Central Valley is truly a beautiful sight.
Mallards, teal, pintail, geese.
All appears to be thriving, largely due to human engineering. Sparkling man-made rivers bring drinking water to cities and irrigation water to farms, where much of our fruits and vegetables that feed our nation are grown.
Tomatoes, onions, garlic. If the Central Valley were a nation,
it would be the largest agricultural producing nation in the world.
It seems comforting when you drive along the interstate and look over to see the workers harvesting your food supply. But here's what you don't see from your car window. Tiny salt granules creeping along rows of tomatoes, pools of white powder taking over lush green fields, a massive sea of salt that is trapped inland with no way to get back to its true home, the Pacific Ocean.
Several stakeholders convened 10 years ago to form the Central Valley Salinity Alternatives Long-Term Sustainability, or CV SALTS, initiative to begin addressing salt in the valley. Through tremendous collaboration and a lot of hard work, they completed a Central Valley Salt and Nitrate Management Plan at the end of 2016. The plan has been developed based on 3 priorities: ensuring safe drinking water, balancing salt and nitrate loading, and managed restoration where reasonable and feasible. The process was collaborative with representatives from state and federal agencies, cities, industry and agriculture, water purveyors, and environmental justice. During fiscal year 15-16, the technical foundation for the plan was completed, including the overall salt and nitrate source and fate conceptual model and several white papers reviewing the impacts of salinity on aquatic life, stock watering, irrigated agriculture, and municipal and domestic supply. Implementation alternatives were evaluated as part of the salt accumulation and land transport study, the nitrate implementation measure strategy, and a local case study on alternate compliance measures to deal with legacy nitrate. In addition, several case studies evaluating appropriate application of beneficial uses and level of protection were completed, such as the work evaluating municipal and domestic supply and agricultural supply in a portion of the Tulare Lake bed, and the development of salinity water quality objectives in the lower San Joaquin River, both of which will be considered by the boards this year. The final plan puts all the pieces together and contains a nitrate permitting strategy, a salt management strategy, policy recommendations on application of secondary MCLs, variances and exceptions, offsets, regulation within a management zone, and guidelines for determining maximum benefit. The plan also contains a surveillance and monitoring plan. We'll be discussing all the different components at a workshop on March 9th. Speaking of the workshop, in the next few months you will have the opportunity to meet several of the staff who've been working so diligently on many of these long-term projects. In February, we will begin the hearings on the pyrethroid control program and a process to evaluate appropriate municipal and domestic supply, designation, and level of protection in ag-dominated water bodies. In March, we'll have a workshop on the CV SALT, salt, and nitrate management plan. In April, there will be hearings on the adoption of a salt and boron water quality objectives for the lower San Joaquin River, and consideration of de-designating municipal and domestic supply and agricultural supply in a portion of the Tulare Lake bed groundwater. And finally, in June, there will be the final consideration for adoption of the pyrethroid control program, the Mune evaluation for ag water bodies, and the salt and boron objectives for the lower San Joaquin River. So we'll be keeping pretty busy here in the planning section, and I have a feeling we'll be seeing you very soon.